Okay, welcome to Your Reactive Dog. My name is Kerry from Howl School for Dogs. I am recording this. So if you are worried about that and you want to switch your camera off, knock yourself out. I wish I could switch mine off. So we're going to be going through what reactivity is and what it is not. We're going to be looking at stress signals, possible causes of reactivity, looking at some strategies, and signposting for further help. Now, important for me to say is that this is a very general presentation. It's an introduction to reactivity. It's not going to be going too deep with it, and it is based on current thinking. I might watch this in 5 years' time and go, oh my God, what was I saying? But as it stands, I'm quite happy with what I'm about to say to you. But we're always learning new things. Some of the stuff may not apply to you and your individual situation and your dog. They're all different, and there can be myriad reasons why things are going on with dogs. So, you know, some of this stuff you may need to filter, and it is never going to be a substitute for working with a professional one-to-one to work out what's going on with your dog. So that's the disclaimer part over. Okay, so reactivity, what is it? So in a nutshell, it is your dog having a strong response to a situation that they are not coping with. That is it. It's just a strong response. You will hear people saying all kinds of stuff online. The biggest issue that I hear from people is that they are overwhelmed with the amount of different viewpoints and information that is shared online. What it is not, though, is your dog being naughty. It's not your dog being stubborn, and it is absolutely nothing to do with dominance. Okay, I bet some of you have been told before that your dog is trying to dominate another dog, or even worse, trying to dominate you. My God, they're not. They're just not coping. So, you know, when we look at dogs and we describe their behavior as being naughty, we're applying very human values to their behavior. But actually, in the dog world, their behavior is perfectly normal and reasonable and sane. Stubborn, they're not being stubborn a lot of the time, just a lot of the time their needs aren't being met for whatever reason. And nothing that I'm going to be saying today is going to be about blaming you for anything when I say about needs not being met. Sometimes you can't meet a need if you don't know there is a need. So that is important to understand. So dominance. I'm going to be paraphrasing Barry Eaton in the bit that I explain here. Barry Eaton wrote an amazing book called Dominance, Fact or Fiction. If you don't have a copy of that, I really recommend getting it. It's brilliant. And if you don't have a notebook with you, have a notebook with you, because you might want to write down some of the things that I say, or you might want to doodle if it gets boring. So dominance. I want you to imagine two dogs, and in front of one of the dogs is a bull. Now, the dog that is driven by toys and by balls, things like that, to get, oh, someone's just arriving. The dog that is motivated the most, the one that has the greatest desire to get that ball, will do what they can to get that ball. Now, they may appear dominant in that situation, but really, if we substitute the word dominance for desire, it's just that they desire that thing more. Now, you might put those same two dogs in front of a delicious cake, and one of the dogs that has a greater need or want or motivation to get to food will get there first. Now, they may appear to dominate the other dog, but they're not. They just want to get to that thing. So when people talk about dominance, it's not a characteristic, it's not a thing to describe a dog as. It's very situational, and we all do it. You know, if you put, I don't know, some delicious vegan snacks in front of me and my dad, I'm going to get to them first because he's going to be repulsed at the thought of eating anything that's vegan. So, but I will get there first. Now, it's not that I'm dominating my dad in that situation. It's just that I want it more. So I hope that that's helpful. And anytime someone starts banging on to you about dominance, use that analogy because I think it's a good one. Now, hierarchy. Your dog is not trying to be top dog. Your dog is not trying to be your boss. If your dog walks through the door before you, it's because they want to get in the house. If your dog is pulling on the lead, it's because there's something interesting that they want to get to, or that they want to, maybe they want to get away from something. So it's nothing to do with them trying to, you know, or who's walking who or any of that crap. It's just, they just want to get where they're going. So yeah, alphas and that sort of stuff, nonsense. Your dog isn't a wolf anyway. And even wolves don't have alphas. They have parents. So yeah, that's another thing to just, if someone says it to you, just point them in the right direction of some good education. Yeah, nothing to do with, they're not pack animals either. Dogs are sociable creatures, but they're not pack animals. Okay, so that's the ranting part of the webinar finished. No, of course it isn't. If you've seen me online, that's all I do. So, reactivity. So the possible causes of a dog to have a big response to a situation they're not coping with. Now, this is a list of possibilities. It's not an exhaustive list, but it is a list of things that could potentially be going on. So, genetics. Your dog may have a genetic predisposition to being a bit anxious or a bit nervous, or they may be a dog breed that has been bred for centuries to be suspicious of people or to keep dogs away. If you look at a dog that has been bred to look after animals, you know, sheep, I don't like to use the word livestock because I don't like that term, but you know, animals, it's not going to be good for them to be distracted and run off and play with another dog. It's better for them to be like, everyone back off, I'm trying to do my job here. So some dogs do have that predisposition. Shepherds, German shepherds, for example, very, very likely to not want people coming in the home. And that's what they've been hardwired and bred to do. So as well as those sorts of breed-specific genetics, you can also have the results of poor breeding. You know, there's no such thing as getting a puppy and then being a blank slate, because they are the product of their mother and their father and any stresses that they experienced in their lives before they were even conceived. Then when they're in the womb, if their mother was in a place where perhaps her needs weren't being met, then she would have been stressed while she was pregnant. And then, you know, in those early important weeks, when the puppy is learning what is safe and what is scary, etc., the puppy may well have been experiencing stress then. So that's why it's really important to make sure that if you're getting a puppy, that you get a puppy from a place where you've met mum and you've met dad, and you know their temperament. When you met the puppies, there was no, mum and dad weren't stressed with you handling them, etc., and they were being kept in the house. Anyway, I'm not going to go on too much about that. There will be another webinar coming up about if you're going to get a puppy, good advice about that. But that's just something to bear in mind. So some anxiety, stress, reactivity could be there before you even met your puppy. Now, and then you've got the socialization window, which runs from about 3 weeks till about 14 weeks of age. That's when the puppy is learning what's safe in the world and etc. which is why we've got so many dogs that were bought during lockdown that struggled afterwards, because in that critical period, they didn't meet any dogs. They didn't see people riding their bikes. They didn't see big groups of people. They didn't sit in cafes, all of that sort of thing. So it was terrifying when lockdown finished and they came out into the world and they're like, what the hell is this? So that's another thing to consider. Illness. There are so many illnesses that can impact the way that a dog is feeling. If they've got hypothyroidism, or if they've got diabetes, or if they've got, I could go on. There's lots of reasons that a dog may not feel well. And we all know what it's like when we're not feeling well, when we're dealing with chronic conditions, the impact that can have on our ability to cope with even minor inconveniences in life. Pain. I'm going to talk about pain more in this session, but pain has such a huge impact on a dog, as can any kind of discomfort, such as if they're having tummy ache. If you're noticing that your dog's poos are quite squidgy and runny, the chances are before that poo happens, they're having tummy ache, which can make them completely irritable. Or if they've got any musculoskeletal pain, it can make it difficult even for them to relax, to lay down. But we're going to talk about that more in a bit. Trauma. They've been attacked once. That can be enough for them to be fearful of other dogs. Just like humans, it only takes one bad experience with something for us to be rationally fearful about that happening again, because we know that, well, it can happen. It has happened. So that's something very realistic. I think a lot of people underappreciate how much it can impact a dog to have a dog run at them, and for them to just they're meant to just walk it off. It can be incredibly traumatizing for them. And of course, reinforced behavior. Now, when I talk about reinforced behavior, I'm talking about, for example, if you, I'm trying to think of a good example now that I've added that onto my list, because for example, sometimes if people are putting dogs into situations and then they're reacting in a certain way, then that can become reinforced for them, and it can actually be reinforcing for themselves. So what I mean by that is, if a dog was to not want people coming near them, and then they growl at them or they lunge at them, and then people move away, then they will likely think, well, thank God I did that. That worked. I'll do that again. So it's a self-reinforcing behavior for them. We all do things that work. What works gets repeated. And that's a really good thing to keep in mind with your dog, with everything they do. What works gets repeated. So pain. Now, I'm not a vet. I'm not a pain specialist, but I've worked with enough dogs to be able to tell now indicators that a dog is struggling with pain. So these are some things to consider, because approximately 80% of behavior cases with dogs are linked to undiagnosed pain, which is why I find it all the more upsetting when I see reactive dogs with prong collars on or slip leads, things like that, because they're having pain inflicted upon them when they could potentially already have pain going on, and that is driving their behavior. So things to look out for with your dog: an unusual or an asymmetrical gait. Now, the way that a dog walks, for most breeds anyway, should be that their legs are like they're on train tracks, with them symmetrically, the distance between them symmetrical, and them all facing forwards. If you notice that one of the legs is moving laterally inward a bit, or perhaps taken a wider step, that could be indicative that there's something going on. Do they bunny hop when they go up steps instead of stepping individually because they are struggling to put weight on one side? Do they do a lot of shake-offs when they're on a walk? Now, that doesn't always mean pain. It could just mean they're managing stress. But that's something to look at. Do they find it difficult to settle and lay down? Or are they settling and laying down too much? Are they chewing and licking the same area all the time? Are they worried about being touched either by you or by people coming near to them? Or, you know, the groomers, does the groomer say, oh, they're a nightmare, you know, they hate it when I do their back end or whatever? Do they pant a lot when they're laying down? Do they sometimes have a loss of appetite? Are they sensitive to noise? There was a study in 2020 that showed dogs that were really phobic of fireworks. When given pain medication, there was a huge reduction in their reactions to fireworks, because it makes sense if you think about a firework goes off, they flinch. If they've got pain going on, that makes that worse. And so then they start to associate, oh, fireworks hurt me. So that's something to consider. And obviously, aggression. Aggression is a key indicator that there may be pain going on because they're intolerant of everything. They don't want someone coming near them. They don't want a dog running up to them, etc. So especially if it's kind of aggression in a kind of random, seemingly random way, you can't find any pattern to it. It just seems to happen every now and then. If the pattern isn't external, the pattern could be internal. So have a look at that. Is it, you know, always in the evenings, on the evening walk after dinner that reactivity occurs? Is it always after they've been on a long hike, etc.? So pay attention. Now, to be clear, I'm not a vet, as I say. A lot of these things can't be diagnosed in a simple checkup at the vets. So quite often I say to my clients, you know, I think we need to get this looked at. They'll go to the vets and the vets will say, look, there's nothing going on here. Some vets are brilliant, but not all vets know the behavioral signs of pain. So they lift their legs up, and unless the dog goes, ow, they don't necessarily think the dog is in pain, but the dog may be masking extremely well, and they may be telling us in other ways that they're struggling. Now, that's all I'm going to say about pain. I'm not an expert on it. I do highly recommend you check out Yorkshire Pooches on social media, or just go to their website. Yaz from Yorkshire Pooches is a wonderful advocate for dogs, and is obsessed with pain. So she'll tell you about things in a far more cohesive way than I ever will. So there will be an opportunity for questions at the end, by the way. So buckets and candles. What I like to use as an analogy when I'm working with a dog that has reactive behavior is the idea of a bucket. There wasn't a drawing of a bucket, so I had to get a paint can, but you know, same difference. So when our dogs are experiencing triggers, these triggers will keep on piling up. We call it trigger stacking, which I'm sure some of you are aware of, but for those of you that aren't, it's trigger stacking. And that's where, if you imagine your dog's emotional capacity as a bucket, and every single trigger adds more liquid into that bucket until it is filled up. Now, those triggers will be releasing adrenaline and cortisol into your dog's system. So until your dog is just absolutely up to here, cannot take any more. So then one more thing happens. A dog comes around the corner and that bucket overflows, because there was just no more room for anything else to happen. And the effects of those stress hormones going into your dog's system will stay there for a good few hours, if not a couple of days. So if we don't find ways to remove the amount of water that is in that bucket, then that dog will just, the next morning will wake up and it's already filled up. So there's no more room for anything else to happen. There's no more capacity. Another analogy is the candles one. So every time a dog experiences something stressful, and this can be micro stresses as well, someone pulling the lead when the dog wants to move in that direction, or a car door slamming outside, or someone touching their food, or someone pushing their bum down to get them to sit when they didn't want to sit. These are all things. And then you've got your bigger stresses, but it's all worth bearing in mind. So candles being lit until there is just too much heat. So we need to look at how we can blow those candles out. So I guess before we can look at how we can reduce the stress, we need to think about how are we even recognizing that our dogs are experiencing stress, because quite often people don't realize it until the dog is growling, snarling, etc. So the ladder of aggression, which was originally devised by a vet called Kendall Shepherd, often starts with very low level behaviors. Look out for these on social media when you see a dog maybe in a doggy daycare environment, or in an environment when there is multi dogs around, or or if they're just with their human and perhaps their human is doing something they're not keen on, you might see some of these low level things going on: yawning, blinking, nose licking. They might turn their head away, and you'll see that with dogs that are emotionally they've got a good amount of emotional intelligence. When one dog comes over to another dog and that dog doesn't want, and they turn their head away, a dog that is very kind of perceptive will be like, okay, I recognize that dog doesn't want me here, I'll move away. But not all dogs are good at recognizing that. Sometimes the dog will move away. Sometimes they'll start pawing as an appeasement gesture to say, go away. They might creep. I hate it when you've probably seen these videos where people say, oh, look at the dogs tiptoeing, aren't they funny, they're trying to be sneaky. But actually that creep that they do is a stress response. It's a very frightened stress response. Often their ears are back, their tail might be under, they might be minimizing their body language. They might lie down with their leg in the air and their tail between their legs as an appeasement gesture. They might, as it gets to the more angry kind of gestures, they might stiffen up or stare and fixate on the thing that is bothering them. And then you get to snarling. And then if all of that hasn't worked, then we get to lunging and biting. And that is very, very reinforcing because it works. So ideally, we want to, when we're out with our dog, we want them to have soft body language. We want to avoid, ridges of tension on their face. We want them to have a relaxed kind of gait. And to help them with that, having a loose lead actually helps, because if we tighten up that lead and make them walk, within half a meter of us, as I see a lot of people doing, and I understand why they're doing it, but we are not facilitating relaxed body language. We're not giving them the space to have that relaxed body language. So, things that can help reduce trigger stacking in our dogs: enrichment. Enrichment, as in giving dogs breed specific things to do that it's good for their brain, that interests them, that decompresses them, that is fun. Honestly, I've seen behaviors with dogs utterly transformed, once quality enrichment was introduced. Now, I'm not talking ball throwing and stuff like that. I'm talking about giving them things like scent work. Scent work is amazing as a confidence boosting thing. If you haven't seen free work setups before, look up free work setups. They were devised by Sarah Fisher, and they're fantastic for confidence. I like giving dogs, it depends on the dog and the breed as well. For my dog, if I think she needs something to help her decompress, for her, it's sniffing and finding things, either using a scent tin or just hiding treats for her to sniff and find. But for other dogs I've worked with, they need something much more bold and dynamic, such as a box with treats in to rip up and shred. Some dogs like to lick things to soothe themselves, a lick mat. Some dogs need a chew to chew on, like a really good long lasting one. I hate promoting these because I am a vegan, but things like the natural icky gross things that you can buy, like I'm not even going to go into it, but the natural ones that are really long lasting. A dentist stick is not going to cut it in this situation if you want a dog to really work the tension that is in their jaw. So that's something that's really important to consider, whether they're getting an outlet for that. And I would say they need that every day, good 2 or 3 opportunities for enrichment. And that doesn't need to be, that can coincide with their walk. With, when I'm walking a dog, there'll be opportunities for scatter feeding and sniffing, and I'll be sticking treats to a tree for my dog to sniff and find, and things like that. So yeah, that's something to consider. Looking into things like man trailing. I offer, if you live in the Northeast, where as I currently live, I offer man trailing, which is where a dog gets to use their nose to find lost people and lost dogs that they've never met before. I've done that with a lot of dogs that struggle with reactivity, and it's fantastic for confidence and for helping them to change the association that they've made. Another thing to consider, equipment. Some equipment can really help, and some equipment can be really not helpful. So I'm a big fan of a Y-shaped harness. Y-shaped means they've got good range of movement with their legs. It's not hindering their ability to move safely. And I wouldn't use a lead that was shorter than 2 meters. Just so they've got that freedom of movement. I am going to be doing a lead walking and long line handling webinar as well, because that's a whole nother thing. And when you do it well, it makes a big difference. I would avoid using aversive equipment, things such as slip leads. You will hear idiots say, oh, it's okay if you just pull the slip lead up and give them a good correction, because that doesn't, it all damages dogs, and it also damages them mentally as well, because it's essentially they're being choked. So I would avoid using slip leads and prong collars and shock collars, things like that, and get yourself a good Y-shaped harness. Sleep and rest is really important. A lot of dogs don't get enough sleep. They really need good quality sleep and good rest. If in this day and age, we tend to take dogs with us everywhere, but think about whether they're getting enough rest as well. I totally get it though, if they've got separation anxiety, that's a whole other thing. But when possible, they need enough sleep. A lot of dogs that go to daycares and things don't get nearly enough sleep. Removing unnecessary pressures. Now, I did a post recently where somebody was talking about stress is a natural part of life. All dogs need to experience stress. We all experience stress. We go skydiving, which is just the most ridiculous analogy. The difference there would be that we would actively choose to go skydiving, or we would actively choose to do a lot of things. Dogs don't get much say in anything they do. So when we can remove unnecessary stress, that makes a huge difference for them. Their very existence, means they have a lot of stress in their lives. They're living in a really human world. They don't get much autonomy on where they sleep and when they go out for a walk. They have to deal with children and cars and other dogs and noises and weird smells of things and equipment. And, there's a lot of stress in their lives. There's so much stress in their lives. They absolutely do not benefit from having other stress deliberately brought into their life as a training mechanism. Diet, really important that your dog has a good diet. If they're eating food that is giving them tummy ache or that's filled with lots of filler, that can give them, it can essentially be like they're eating McDonald's every day, which can make them feel sluggish or hyperactive. Or, I was working with a German Shepherd once that was every day was having jumbo bones, pedigree jumbo bones. And he was then really becoming quite aggressive in the evenings and ragging on his humans' clothes and really struggling. And we realized that those jumbo bones were giving this dog tummy ache and he just couldn't cope with it. And that was directly impacting his behavior. And then it was impacting his behavior outside of the home because he wasn't rested enough, because he couldn't rest enough. If you don't know the website already, if you're in the UK, a really good website is allaboutdogfood.co.uk, which gives everything a nutritional rating. And I always say aim for something that is kind of 75% or above. If you're not in the UK or you don't have access to that website, just look at the ingredients. They're normally listed in what makes up the food from the largest amount down to the smallest amount. And sometimes it can be quite alarming when you look and you see in some treats and some foods the amount of sugar and all kinds of filler and rubbish that's in them. So have a little look. Things that also help: be kind to our dogs. I think sometimes in the world of obedience with dogs, it can be easy to forget that our dog is a sentient being trying to make their way in the world. And they're doing the best they can, even though their behavior might be driving us nuts. It might be, we might be so stressed with it, we might be feeling anxious ourselves, etc. Remember, our dogs aren't trying to give us a hard time. It's because they're having a hard time. And try to be kind. And also, if you do have a bad day, and be kind to yourself as well, and just remember you're doing your best. That's really important too. Let your dog be a dog. Let them sniff. Let them spend 10 minutes sniffing that bin on that walk, because that will make such a difference to them. Think about what your dog was bred for. If your dog is a spaniel, don't be surprised that they're going to be dragging you down the street because they're sniffing everything. They're hardwired to do that. So don't try and kind of go against what their nature is. And try to ensure that your dog is in an appropriate environment. If you follow me online, you'll know that I talk a lot about places that are deemed dog friendly, but have nothing good for dogs in them. There's a rise in dog meetups, dog cafes, dog bars, I've seen a dog bouncy castle place and things like that. Dogs don't need these things, and they're not necessarily going to benefit from them. In fact, they could be quite stressful for them. So just because it suits us doesn't always mean it suits the dog. Remember, dogs aren't pack animals, and actually bringing a lot of dogs together that don't know each other can be quite stressful for them. So that's something to bear in mind. Predictability is really important, and I'm going to be showing you in a minute a little strategy for helping you to helping your dog to find the world predictable. Predictability is key. Often dogs are reactive because everything is unpredictable. They don't know what's going to happen, and that ties in as well with the humans in the dog's life. If one person wants them to do one thing and then another human comes around and they want them to do another thing, that can be stressful. if one person loves it when they jump up and they play rough with them, and then the dog jumps up at someone else, and then that's not acceptable to that person, that can be very stressful for that dog, and that can lead to trigger stacking as well, because they don't know, the goalposts keep moving. So consistency is key, and trying to make the world as predictable for your dog as possible is really important. So things that harm our dogs: punishment, telling them off for things that they don't, when they don't know what they've done. You know, guilty dog videos, horrendous. Dogs don't experience guilt. That would mean they would need to apply human values to mentally time travel and apply human values to a situation that they wouldn't be able to do. So they don't really experience guilt in that sort of way. So I've kind of covered this bit here, so I'm going to skip this slide. Now, a well-fitted Y-shaped harness. Does your dog find it hard when the harness is going on? Does it have to go over their head? Do you have to lift them up so that their legs can go into it? Now, if you've got a dog that's struggling with pain, that could be difficult for them. Some dogs don't like things going over their head, so spending some time desensitizing them to it, or I love perfect fit harnesses, because you clip them around the dog and they don't have to be manhandled too much. A really good length lead is really great. If you've got a dog that you've got a big, powerful dog, having a lead that can clip onto the front and the back can be really useful as well. No, you don't want to just have it clipped onto the front, because that can cause gait issues, but on the front and the back, that just kind of like helps to balance out the any when I say pressure, I don't mean we're deliberately applying pressure, but any pressure that accidentally is applied can be useful. Other good brands, Roughwear are a good brand, T-Touch are excellent, but just research them. As long as they're a Y-shaped harness, that can be useful. Now, these are some things that add stress to our dogs' lives that may not look like they would. Rattle tins, water sprays. How many of you find yourself going to your dogs? These are all things that interrupt behaviors, but don't help them to make a better choice. They don't necessarily recognize what's going on, why they're being interrupted, and actually it can start to become quite frightening for them. So rattle tins will scare them, stop their behavior in that moment, but won't change the association for them or help them to feel better about whatever it was that was worrying them in the first place. Again, spraying them with water, yes, it doesn't hurt them, but it's going to be alarming to them, and it's not going to help them to deal with whatever is worrying them. I want you to imagine Freddy Krueger has just come around the corner. You're quite alarmed to see Freddy Krueger, and you scream, and someone starts shaking a coin bottle in your ear, or spraying you with water, or going, stop it. It's not going to help you. I understand why people would say and you know, say stop it, because often we're quite embarrassed as well by our dog's reaction. So we want people to know that I don't want them to be doing this, but it's not helping your dog. They have a legitimate worry about something in the distance, so we want to help them with that. So what will help them? So some dogs have barrier frustration. Just as a side, there wasn't a picture of a dog with a harness on, so I had to unfortunately go with this picture of dogs with leads attached to their collars, which I wouldn't normally recommend. Sometimes dogs aren't reactive because they actively want to fight another dog or because they're scared of them. Sometimes it's barrier frustration. They are frustrated, they cannot get over to every dog they see, so they lunge and they bite and things like that. I'm sure some of you have experienced that. Now, when that's happening, what we can do to help them feel better about that is to avoid on-lead greetings when we're walking down the street, because dogs are not very good at it. They pick up on patterns very well. So if we introduce them to dogs when we're walking down the street, they don't understand why we then wouldn't let them go over to every other dog that they see. They're not saying hello. It's information gathering. So what we want to get them used to is when they're walking down the street with us, we're not going to be interacting with other dogs. In fact, when we see another dog, I'm going to be, I'm going to want you to engage with me in that moment. And I'm going to show you a video in a minute showing you how to do that. Often dogs that go to, on like a lot of, if they go to like a secure field with loads of dogs, or they go to a doggy daycare, they spend a lot of time going up to dogs and are used to dogs coming up to them all the time. So when they are then out with their human, they are frustrated that they can't do the same thing. So they often are learning bad skills in those sorts of situations. So be mindful if your dog is in that, going to that sort of environment, and consider whether or not it's impacting their ability to be able to move around the world naturally and in a good kind of way. And in the home, things that you can do to assist with reactivity in the home if they're reacting to things outside: putting things on the windows, some clear film, frosted film along the windows. It's fantastic, even if it's just along the bottom part of the window so they can't see out. You're reducing trigger stacking at home, and you're letting your dog have a rest from having to constantly be on guard. Rugs. Stop your dog slipping and sliding around if they're playing with another dog, or if there's someone at the door. If they're slipping and sliding on laminate or wooden flooring, that's adding to the stress and adding to the trigger stacking. And barriers are your best friend in a multi-dog household. Having a baby gate so that you can separate the dogs but they can still see each other, give them some good enrichment either side, can be fantastic for them to have some space from each other. But again, that's for another workshop. Now then, reactivity on a walk. What should we do? Location is everything. If your dog has had a bad experience somewhere, even if they go back there and there isn't another dog there, they may well be looking around for other things, such as, I always use this analogy, if you were in a shed and there was a big spider in there, which freaked you out, the next time you went into that shed, you would be looking for that spider just in case. So consider whether you're taking your dog to an environment that is somewhere that they have a bad association with. Also consider whether it's just too overstimulating for them, or if there's enough healthy stuff to stimulate them. Often like a large green space with no good sniffing opportunities can be difficult for dogs, because all there is wide expanse and they just think, well, I'll just go and run after that dog. Whereas, for example, a wooded area will give them a lot more interest in sniffs and smells, and will also help to restrict the sight of things in a distance as well. I'm a huge fan of going to cemeteries and graveyards with dogs. They're brilliant places. You don't generally have off-lead dogs running at you, because dogs generally have to be on lead in those places. Also, there's loads of paths going left, right, and center all over the place, which I think is a bit like Pac-Man. So then when you see a dog or a little ghost coming along, you can choose to go to another direction and get yourself to a distance. You need to be, if you have a dog that's struggling with reactivity, you need to imagine what is the distance at the moment that they can see a dog and not completely lose their mind. So have a think now of your dog. How far do they need to be? Because you now need to try and commit to maintaining that distance, because that's where we're going to start doing the work from. That can be hard in an urban environment. I know, I lived in Hackney, the East End of London, for years. I know how difficult it can be, but there is always places that you can go to, even if it's like a kind of industrial estate or something like that. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It can be ugly, but as long as you can get distance. Or if you've got a car, can you go and park up in your car and do some noticing of dogs in your car? Try not to take them, even if it's just once a week, you take them to a place that is filled with dogs. you're reminding your dog, oh, I can't cope with this. I remember now, I hate everyone. So we really need to commit to maintaining the distance that they can cope with at the moment and sticking to that. If you can't do it every day, give them a rest day. It's totally fine for them to have a day off a walk. It's much better for them to have a rest day than to go somewhere that is causing them immense stress. Oh, sorry, I just got a window, I think, came up on my screen. Sorry, let me just get rid of that. Equipment. I've talked about the kind of equipment. It's also worth having with you in your backpack, if you have a backpack or a bag, a toy, a novel toy that your dog really likes. Perhaps they haven't seen it in a while. So that if you need to, you can bring that out, and that can be something that you can play a bit of tug with, and they can work that through their jaw. That can be great. Another thing, rewards. I'm a big fan of having 2 levels of rewards with you. You've got your medium value. I think that I've gone a bit slow motion in the camera, so I'm going to switch my camera off a second. Just turn my camera off. Sorry, guys, bear with me a second. Okay. Have 2 levels of rewards with you. Have some rewards that your dog likes. If they tolerate vegetables, have some of that mixed in with it as well, and have a lot of it, because you're going to be doing scattering and hiding treats and things like that. But then I want you to have your super duper high value reward that your dog thinks is the greatest thing on earth. And that also needs to be in your pouch. Generally speaking, that needs to be something smelly, something moist, something like cheese or chicken or sausage or whatever your dog loves. Now, here is the key. That dog must not get any of these things unless it's really difficult. The situation is really difficult. They can have the medium value treats, but the super duper high value ones are reserved for the hardest of situations. And then what I want you to do is, when your dog notices something in the distance that they are worried about, as soon as they notice that trigger, I want you to say yes and reward them with the high value reward. Now, I want you to do this even if they're barking, because you're not rewarding them for barking because they're not barking for rewards. They're barking because that thing in the distance, whatever it is worrying them. Now, that could be a cat, that can be a dog, that can be a person. All I want them to do is notice that thing in the distance, that trigger, and you're going to say yes and pop that high value treat into their mouth. They haven't got to look at you. They haven't got to sit. They haven't got to do any of those things. They've just got to notice the thing in the distance. And that is how we start to make the world predictable for them. Now, generally speaking, if they're not able to engage with the rewards that you're offering them, it might be that you are just too close to that trigger. Or it could be that they're just so stressed that food can't help them. Or it could be that this is a pain situation. You cannot train away pain. But that is a good place to start. And then if they keep looking at that thing in the distance, just keep saying yes, reward, yes, and keep popping the treats in their face. If that person is walking closer and closer towards them, you're going to need to get your dog further away so that you can maintain that distance. So if that means you need to do a bit of practicing doing a this way and then rewarding your dog somewhere beforehand, do that. Do it in your house if you need to. Just walk around and then go this way and change direction. And when your dog chooses to come with you, say yes and reward them. When they've learned that very well, that can then be a good thing to do when you are noticing that a trigger is going to be getting closer, because you should be still at a point where your dog can engage with you. So then get them to distance. And then if they want to look back at that thing that's worrying them, great, go back to marking with a yes and a reward as they're looking. often people try and get them to not look at the thing. And I think, well, if we use the example of Freddy Krueger, for those that don't know Freddy Krueger, he's the villain in Nightmare on Elm Street. If Freddy Krueger is just lurking around at the end of the street, I'm going to want to keep my eye on him. I'm not going to want to be sitting down or looking at someone else. I'm going to want to keep my eye on him to make sure he doesn't come near me. So that's a key thing to be doing. And that's called the engage game, by the way. You're just literally rewarding your dog for engaging with something that worries them. And then when the trigger has passed, that's when I would do a little scattering of rewards. That's when, if you think of it like working out in the gym, and then you've got really, a high octane workout. I don't go to the gym, but people do, I believe. And then there's a cool down, isn't there? And that's what we want to do with our dog. We want to do something that's going to help them to come down from that. Now, that can be a game of tug, or it can be a scattering of treats, or you could be sticking some treats onto a wall or something for your dog to sniff and find, just to help them to come down. If you've encountered a few too many triggers, is it time to call it a day on that walk? Even if you've only been out for 10, 15 minutes, go home. Because when it gets to the point when it's too stressful, no one's having a good time. Go home and rethink, was that the right place to take your dog? Is there something else going on with your dog? These are things to consider. Do you need to work with a professional to help you through this and to coach you through this? Think about the time of day that you're doing this. Think about the weather. On a windy day, it's so much worse for dogs. All the scents are being blown around. It's incredibly stressful for them. So where the scents are being blown around, they can't make sense of things. They don't know where things are coming from. So that can be really stressful. So if it's super windy, or, the weather is pretty bad, consider, should I do this, or should I just have a day at home, give my dog some good enrichment, do a free work setup, that sort of thing. So, hang on a second, bear with me, my computer is being all right. I promised myself I wouldn't swear in this session, so I'm not going to. Oh, sorry, and my computer is there we go. Oh, hang on, we've skipped over things now. There's a video I want to show you, and now I've got the spinning wheel of death on my screen. If I can't show you the video, I will send it to you all so you can watch basically the engage game in action. I think my computer is not going to let me show it, so I will say, just consider doing the things that I've talked about: preventative stuff at home, reducing unnecessary stress for your dog, confidence boosting things, scent work, free work setups. Consider the equipment you're using, the food they're eating, whether there's pain going on. Try using the engage game, maintaining that distance, working in a graveyard or English Heritage. If you're in the UK, those are great places. Give that a try. And if that is still something that's struggling for you, work with an ethical professional. Get in touch with me. I work with people virtually and in person. Look out for red flags in other professionals. If they're talking about dominance, alphas, corrections, punishment, you don't want that. Pay attention for more webinars from me. And if you want to learn more about stress signals, Doggy Language by Lily Chin is just tremendous. I hope this has been useful. It's been longer than I thought it was going to be. I'd hope I'd have more time to show you videos, but I'm going to send them to you anyway, as I said. Sorry about the technical issues. I hope this has been helpful for you. Haven't even got time for questions. Oh, there's a hand up. Go on then. We'll have a quick question from Stephanie.
Sorry,
go for it, Stephanie.
Sorry.
It's all right. It's okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Sorry, I've waffled for so long.
Yeah, I don't want to keep you, and other people might have, because I didn't want to jump in. I have about 50 questions, but I get people have things to do. Just a quick one. My behaviourist at the vet's, my dog has got lots of different reactivity, and it's exacerbated when he's in the car also.
Okay.
So obviously if I'm driving to somewhere, he's sometimes already his bucket's filled before we get there because he's seen dogs,
Sure.
cars. The behaviours that the vet has told me to buy, it looks like a GIMP mask. It's horrible. To cover his eyes so that he can't see anything. I think
Okay.
that looks horrendous, but I don't know what you think about that. I don't know if he'll wear it or whether to get something to cover the windows. You know, if you've got a baby, you get something to cover the windows. But this is only one of the things I'm working with because he's got several issues. But I just wondered if you think that sounds cruel, or if you've heard of it.
I haven't heard of those, to be honest. I'm a big
won't
fan.
send you. I mean, it looks awful, but you know.
I'm going to do a Google immediately after this. Don't you worry. I would say, you want to avoid putting something on a dog that if you think it's going to cause him stress. So that's the one thing I would say, is do a little bit of desensitization and see if your dog can cope with it. But if your dog, I mean, I personally would rather go with kind of like having a dog inside. I like a crate in the car. It's the only time I actually use a crate for my dog is in the car. I like a car crate because it helps them to feel secure, stops them rocking and rolling all over the place. And also you can then make sure they can't see out of it, but they haven't got anything restrictive on their face or anything. Or putting things on the windows can be useful as well. So yeah, that would be, but I would say, you know, give it a go. But if you feel like it's causing more stress and it's negating all the other things you're doing, then I would not bother.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. Any more questions before we go? I'm conscious that I have talked a lot and I hope it wasn't death by PowerPoint. Any more questions? Yeah, go for it, Catherine.
Hi, thank you.
Yes.
We have an 8-month-old pug, and he's become very fearful on his walks and freezing a lot, and like just not moving. He'll even sit down on the sidewalk when he sees dogs like really far away. But we live in a flat, and so he's out 3 times a day for his not just walks, but to go to the toilet as well.
Sure. Yeah.
How would you recommend we navigate that in terms of some of your advice around the walks, but when we have to go out as a matter of necessity?
Yeah.
Because we also live on a really wide open green.
Okay. So what you could do is what we call spider webbing, which is where you go outside and you just do some little activities just outside the front door, and do like some little scatter games out there, so that you are making that outside location just outside your home into a place which your dog has the association of, oh, I love it here. This is where we go out and we play that game where cheese gets scattered, or where we do this fun game. So we call it spider webbing because you're kind of moving in different directions. I'll put my camera back on if it will stop being a wally. No, it's been stupid. So if you imagine the front door being the central point, the lines are coming out from different directions, at different lengths. So you go out and you go maybe a little bit to the left and do a game. Then you come in, then you go out to the right and do a little game, always with the front door in sight. So you're making a web. That can be quite good to go out there, just to make, because I get it. I live in a flat as well, so I know what you mean. Going outside, we want to make that area outside into a safe haven for your dog, so that's not becoming a trigger for them as well. Do you think that your dog finds it stressful going out there to go to the toilet?
Yeah, because we're also like 200 meters from the beach, so a lot of people walk past with their dogs, so he often encounters dogs within like 30 seconds of leaving home.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I would work on doing little short activities, going out for 3 minutes and doing a fun little activity, giving your dog some sort of reward that they don't get at any other time, and doing that, scattering bits of sausage and then going straight indoors so that your dog knows, oh, that's okay. I didn't have to go too far. I just, the front door was there. Only 3 minutes is too much, 30 seconds. And while you're doing this, if you need to, you can get a little piddle patch to have in the in the kitchen or something, so that your dog maybe has somewhere to go to the toilet indoors while you're learning. That could be something that could be quite good to kind of reduce too much trigger stacking. Do you have a balcony at all, or?
Yeah, well, we raised him on a piddle patch, and he sort of outgrew it and had like a clear desire to be outside marking and things. So we've sort of retired it, but at the same time, this issue has developed. So it's just been a bit difficult to work out what to do.
Work on making that outside bit into a place that's quite fun. And maybe when you go out there, could you put like even like a freestanding barrier so that his view is restricted, like a windbreaker for the beach, one of those out so that he can't see things. And if he notices a dog, immediately mark that with a yes and then a reward. Okay. Even if he's barking, even if it's just the sound of a dog, the moment he hears that, yes, reward. Okay. So and you can practice that game as well at the window, looking outside, so that you open the window, maybe hold him in your arms and just notice dogs out the window, so that he's starting to learn, not so bad. Yeah. And give that a try. Get in touch if it's not working, and we can look at a new plan.
Thank you.
Start having a go at making that into a kind of more safe environment.
Thank you. And I'm mindful of other people, but do you also, a lot of your advice for enrichment and for the training is around food. Should we be worried about him getting fat? Because he's a pug. So I'm just a little concerned that a lot of the advice with training is food oriented. And should we be cutting back his main meals for this, or?
So I've got a dog that weighs 4 kilos, and I do a lot of enrichment with her that involves food. And because the treats that I give her are single protein, there's no wheat or filler in them, and they're tiny, like I'm talking a pea in size, the treats I give her. I get the JR Pets pates, and I chop them up really tiny. I also incorporate bits of veg into it as well. I know not all dogs will eat veg. Fortunately, my dog loves it. But also, say, for example, my dog's meant to have 120 grams of food a day. I tend to give her 100 grams. So I'm making that allowance for additional treats and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. We don't want your dog to get overweight, because that'll cause all kinds of other issues. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. Any other questions? I think there was one in the chat. Now I just need to find where the chat is. Oh, here it is. I don't know what is going on with my laptop. There was a question written. No, I can't see the chat. So if someone has a question, they want to be brave and say it out loud.
I don't think it was a question. It was somebody saying they had to go, but they were endorsing Yorkshire pooches like you recommended.
Oh, cool. Okay, great. Yeah, she's wonderful. All right, guys. So nice to see you all. Thank you so much for coming along. I will send you videos of the Engage game in action. Hope it was useful. All right.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Have a nice evening.
You.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye, everyone.